Okay, and indeed, we're talking about how iPlayer grows, but it's already growing very strongly. So, what is the sort of the strategy that's bringing you the recent growth?
Well, there's no silver bullet, obviously. We have seen absolutely extraordinary growth. Over the last year, we saw 20% uplift in viewing hours, which is phenomenal. That's like double the pace of Netflix's growth. But there's no one single strategy that drives that. It's a whole sort of coordinated effort across the BBC. So firstly, obviously, our content breadth and depth. We really strive to make sure that we have something for everyone, whether that's the best new big drama, whether it's bringing our archive back in as much volume and quality and quantity as possible, through to all of the live events that we cover, through sports, music and news. In addition, obviously, it's about making sure that we are commissioning from an iPlayer first point of view. So we're really thinking about what iPlayer needs, what audiences within an iPlayer need, and that's obviously a switch from a kind of previous linear focus into very much an iPlayer focus. But it's also thinking about the cadence of how we actually plan and release content to make sure that we've got a continual drumbeat of content that appeals to a user, an audience member, in a way that really sort of continues to build engagement and retention. And the last point really is around our focus on retention. So we get a phenomenal number of people coming in on an annual basis. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got something for them to come back to on a weekly basis and a daily basis. And so there's a real focus on how we retain people.
Okay, so when you talk about commissioning for iPlayer first, just tell us what that means in practice. So does that mean that you're making programming decisions with the iPlayer audience in mind first, or is it the shows when you release them in terms of the actual windowing?
It's all of those things. I mean, the BBC used to be very much channels focused, so people would commission shows for BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three. Okay, thanks. And that was obviously a very specific focus on the type of channel. Like, you would be thinking about when a specific show would be released. Is that like a 9 o'clock Saturday slot? Is that, so that's the basis by we'd be filling a linear schedule. Obviously, filling a streaming service is that it has to always be on. It always has to have something, regardless of who you are, what you want to watch. We have to provide that rich breadth and depth. And so that's where the commissioning for iPlayer first comes in, because it means that we're thinking about how do we ensure that we've got that continual drumbeat of content. So making that affects like the volume of content that we would produce across different genres, as well as obviously, how we sort of bring all of the other archive and events together as well. So we're looking across the year at, what happens, what do we need when, how does that play out across the slate? How are we appealing to different types of audiences? And so that's what it means. So our commissioners are all focused on that kind of volume, that drumbeat, that sort of iPlayer first mentality, and they're thinking about an audience rather than a channel.
Okay, and for the broadcasters, their big sort of unique selling point, I guess, versus the global streamers is local, or it has been, and you are the local champions. But the globals are trying to get more local and spending more in production locally. I mean, how do you maintain that kind of leadership in being the company that really understands the zeitgeist of, the UK and is the best at giving UK viewers what they want?
Well, I mean, I've worked for global streaming companies as well, and I know how complex that is because, you either have to have really deep pockets or a very specific focus, in the way that BritBox does or a movie does, etc. So there are real challenges thinking about, being at that scale globally and appealing to audiences. So you either have to take we're sort of focused on this very specific audience, or to be all things to all people, you need very deep pockets. But obviously, from the BBC, we have more than 100 years now of legacy of serving British audiences and programming for British audiences. So we have that depth of knowledge already. But thinking about the UK and all of the nuance that comes with that, our regions, our nations, our different cities, thinking about making sure that we have that breadth of coverage, whether it's a national moment like a coronation or a funeral, right the way through to the biggest sporting events that we can really get behind our teams, as well as obviously really understanding, commissioning content and programs like, around, let's say, Bradford City of Culture. There's a program out at the moment, a drama that's doing really, really well on iPlayer that was sort of filmed and shot there around that. So there's all that nuance that we can bring together that if you're a global player, it's impossible for you to have that level of focus. And so I think the BBC, obviously, with its strengths across not just TV, but radio and news and sports as well, we can harness all of that and bring that together for audiences and meet needs that others aren't set up to provide.
Okay, and you mentioned retention. I mean, you've used sort of tentpole events to kind of bring audiences in and then retain them. I mean, tell us how you do that, because you're kind of very good at building up a bit of a interest in something that's coming, but then you sort of use the event itself to kind of start promoting what follows. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the BBC is a sort of known destination for the biggest events. So, for example, Wimbledon, everyone knows that's always going to be on the BBC, that the BBC is always going to cover it. But beyond that, I mean, obviously, what we want to do is make sure that if you're a tennis fan or if you want to watch Wimbledon, then you can come in and do that. But before the actual tournament starts, we want to start with, kind of seeding previous content, archive content, documentaries about tennis players. We also have the rights for Eastbourne, Nottingham, Queen's, all of the sort of slightly smaller tournaments, so that we're really giving tennis fans, that kind of rich breadth of content across tennis. But also then using that as an opportunity to sort of tell people, well, actually we have snooker, or there's this event that we're covering as well. So it's really thinking about how we bring audiences in earlier, so that we've got something that sort of builds anticipation, that we give them the best possible coverage. So, I mean, obviously on iPlayer, we have the ability to obviously cover multiple different matches at any one time and give people different routes into those in a way that you can't do on linear. So we want to give that real rich depth of coverage during the event. But then what we've also started doing a lot more of, particularly last summer, which was a phenomenal summer for live events for us, with like Glastonbury, Euros, Wimbledon, the 2 elections that we weren't quite expecting at the time. There was so much going on, and so that it was such a phenomenal peak of viewing. But what we were trying to do is we really switched our marketing focus to be really focused on retention, because we knew that people would come. We don't need to tell people that you can watch the Euros on the BBC or Wimbledon. But what we tried to do is really market relevant content to audiences who we knew would be coming in for that. So an example of that might be, we know that getting younger male viewers is something that is a challenge for a lot of streamers. But we know that they'll come in and watch football. So when we had them, we wanted to make sure that they knew about additional content. So we were marketing the Traitors that was coming up. We'd be marketing other programs that we know that they're going to be interested in, and using that real switch in marketing towards retaining them beyond that and introducing them to a broader range of programming.
Okay, and we just heard about the youngsters, obviously, and youngsters are considered, well, people have a perception that they're an Achilles heel for broadcasters.
Yeah.
So, how are you, engaging youngsters, bringing them in, keeping them there, growing that audience?
Yeah, well, it was great to hear the example about Dreaming Whilst Black. I mean, obviously, so the BBC does take, it does take risks in a way that some other PSBs or other streamers wouldn't. When we really believe in a story and when we were trying to back something that's different and that really representative and innovative. So I think that's certainly one part of what we do. But I mean, more broadly, it's really about using data and insight to understand what people are responding to. So, our kind of factual fact-end content has been performing phenomenally well, as has live sport and live events. So those 2 things are the key things for bringing in audiences, or younger audiences. So the Traitors, for example, had an absolutely phenomenal recent season. Over 10 million accounts tuned in to watch that. That's, by far and away, like an outstanding result. Other things like Race Across the World, that was last year's biggest factual show. over 7 million people came in to watch episode 1 and 2, and nearly 50% of that of 16 to 34 viewing was on iPlayer. So, you know, we've made really strong inroads to be a destination for those kinds of shows that people really like. The Apprentice, it's in its 19th year now, so I think it's about IP that people continue to come back to. But then also with, like, at Christmas as well, we just had the most phenomenal Christmas. Gavin and Stacey, Wallace and Gromit, those two shows, you know, individually pulled in 21 million viewers, which, I mean, those numbers we thought were a thing of the past. So, and I think the beauty of Gavin and Stacey as a show was that it brought back all of the fans from 20 years ago, but also it brought in all of these new audiences who had never watched it before. And I think because our marketing teams did such a great job of promoting the show and seeding out little like clips and teasers before it actually aired, I think people were catching up on the previous 3 seasons, you know, a good couple of months before. So Gavin and Stacey, the archive programming, was in our top 10 programs that people were watching, particularly younger audiences. But because it's a show that connects and appeals to everyone, that's how we got that overall viewing spike, but with that phenomenal impact on younger audiences as well. So again, I mean, there isn't sort of one single strategy. It's about sort of, and our BBC Three team are fantastic at commissioning shows that are specifically catering to those younger demos, like Glow Up, like Drag Race, etc. So we've got real focus of how our teams are set up, and real sort of singularity of focus on commissioning content for that audience, continue with IP across that real breadth that appeals to those audiences and having things that they can come back to year after year, and also like being really successful at bringing archive back, and also live events. So it's a whole combination of things.
Yeah, and that Gavin and Stacey really had a flavour of an event, sort of in its own right. It was kind of a great build-up. Yeah. I mean, what about older viewers? Because, I mean, it strikes me that the biggest competition to iPlayer is BBC Broadcasting, and older viewers, they quite like linear TV, they like EPGs, they like the channel up-down, channel numbers. So what's the incentive? Because there isn't any exclusive content on iPlayer. So, you know, if they can get all the content anywhere on the broadcast channels, what's the incentive for older viewers to come into iPlayer? Because that would be a very easy way to grow your digital share in terms of sort of headline figures.
Yeah. I mean, we market iPlayer as better on iPlayer. So, you know, there are certain things that you get on iPlayer that you can't get through linear channels. And obviously what we're competing with is habit. I mean, you know, I know my mum, for example, she said to me the other day that she was telling me about the show that was on at like 5:15 on BBC Two, and she was like, "Oh, but you can record it." And I was like, "Mum, there's this thing called iPlayer." So I think there's this thing that, you know, there's a real sort of habit, but I think once you kind of like get through that, then obviously Red Button, we do a lot of stuff that sort of bridges the gap between linear and provides easy, quick routes into iPlayer. So we're trying to sort of make the routes in as seamless as possible. And then it's about making the experience as easy to use as possible when they're in. So, and also make it better so that they, you know, they can see, actually, I don't have to use a PVR anymore, actually. I'm straight in there and I can actually I can catch up on all the seasons of Call the Midwife, that rather than just watching the latest season. Or if it's about, you know, a live event, we've got UHD coverage, we've got all of the other, you know, kind of events that aren't covered on linear. So it's about making sure that people have the best routes in, have the best experience when they're there, that they're, you know, we give them the value of on demand, you know, and also that we give them that better coverage that they wouldn't otherwise get on linear.
Okay, and we heard from Everyone TV this morning, along with UV, about Freely. And Freely, I mean, if you don't have an area where it's an all-streaming service, and it's got that programme guide experience, and it's quite easy, therefore, for people to slip into streaming without even realising, really. It's the same kind of experience they're used to. I mean, does it make any difference to you at iPlayer how people come in? Because, you know, you seem to have a front door, which is the app, the icon, and you go in and you're straight into the iPlayer home screen. And if you go through sort of a streaming channel or Red Button, you go start over, it's almost like a side entrance where you come in a different way. I mean, you know, do you care, and how do you see the sort of the digital journey evolving when people come to iPlayer?
I mean, definitely don't care. I mean, we want routes in to be as simple, seamless, easy as possible. So, I mean, the fact that FreeVR innovating so much around how you can sort of bridge the gap between linear and digital experiences, I think is great, and that's exactly what we want to do. I think it's really important to ensure that people have that flexibility and also seamless and easy routes in. And it's also about content discovery. I mean, making sure that people are actually discovering content that they love without having to sort of select different apps and go in through different front doors is much better from an audience point of view. So yeah, wholeheartedly support that.
Yeah, great. Okay, we've got time for audience questions. So if anyone's got one, shout now. I've got some more otherwise. But okay. Okay, so I mean, you mentioned some of the shows that are doing really well with youngsters. You've also been sort of acquiring some shows to kind of, you know, aim at that audience. I mean, just tell us about that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are very, you know, local, homegrown content focused, but we have been picking up and acquiring shows that do sort of fill gaps in certain things. So I would say one of the big successes that we've had is with Pretty Little Liars. You know, it's a multi-season series that has continued to perform time and time again. It just hits that sort of younger female viewing need and has performed really, really well. So, yeah, I mean, we've got a great acquisitions team who have successfully picked up archive series, etc., from US, you know, box sets, but are also, you know, either picking up new shows as well from different parts of the world to really complement our own commissioning and programming. But we are sort of very much sort of commission-led. That's our remit, that's our purpose. But yeah, our acquisitions is really important in terms of gap filling and making sure that we have that complementarity to the overall content offer.
Okay, any questions yet? Okay, gentleman there.
Hello, Rob Gallagher from Omdia. Thinking about growing digital market share, what do you see as the main challenges or opportunities when it comes to connected TV platforms, the UIs of Tizen, Amazon Fire, etc.?
So that's not my area of expertise, but I mean, I think obviously development of their own ecosystems. I mean, I think the media bill obviously puts PSBs in hopefully a good position in terms of being prominent and being visible. Our distribution team does a great job at making sure that we have that security of prominence, because I mean, ultimately that's what people are looking for. We need the right routes in, and I think it's through partnerships that help us to ensure that we get easy, seamless journeys from, you know, TV UIs into iPlayer. And so we really want to partner with them and make sure that we are taking advantage of as many opportunities and working with them, both to improve the performance of their own technologies as well as obviously ours. So I think it's very much a collaborative approach that we want to take.
Okay, got time for another question? Okay, Natalie?
I'm just interested very simply in what your measurement of success is in a world where we've got streamers measuring through KPIs which are very commercially driven. You have a specific mandate in the UK, so you don't have a monetization model that's typical. So how do you measure its time spent? What is the key? What are the key metrics for you in terms of judging growth and success?
Well, I mean, obviously iPlayer is part of the BBC, so the BBC measures its success through the number of people who continue to pay a license fee. So that's ultimately what, you know, the iPlayer is designed to achieve, to make sure that people feel like they're getting value from their license fee, and to make sure that we serve license fee payers in the best possible way. But in terms of measuring iPlayer success, we look at, our primary metric is weekly active accounts. So we look at the number of people, or the number of accounts who are accessing iPlayer on a weekly basis. So unlike other streamers, we don't look at monthly, we look very specifically at weekly. And then primary and secondary to that, we look at viewing hours per account as well.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Kerensa.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure.
Thanks.